Well, Taylor, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this interview on City Council candidates. And why don't we start by letting you introduce yourself, what seat you're running for, and a little bit of background about yourself.
Absolutely, Tim. As you said, my name's Taylor Hall. Lived here in Concord since 2018. Lived in New Hampshire 10 years on Saturday, running for City Council at large. Very excited to be running. This has been a very exciting race, and I'm looking forward to being able to contribute to my community, give something back, and also help our community grow.
Wonderful. What do you do when you're not running for City Council?
Full-time, I work at Southern New Hampshire University as a student finance counselor. Aside from that, my wife and I have 3 chickens and 4 cats, and they keep me pretty busy. But also I have a pretty large Lego collection that's building up in our basement.
Well, that sounds pretty interesting. So we'll jump right into the questions here. I want to talk about tax base. So in the city of Concord, we have a lot of tax-exempt property, so that shifts the tax burden onto property owners, businesses, and so forth. Is growing the tax base one of your priorities? And if so, what can we do to expand Concord's tax base?
Yeah, so we always want to look at ways to increase revenue for the city, to expand the money coming in without necessarily growing the tax base and putting the burden onto homeowners, onto businesses. I think we need to look at other ways to increase revenue. I think looking at some of the revenue streams coming in, so the amount of money that we receive from the state for services that the city contributes for having the capital here, looking at different fees, things like that the businesses have to pay, see what can be simplified, see what may be able to make more sense if we increase. Looking at things holistically so that the burden doesn't get passed on to the taxpayer, onto the business owner.
So not necessarily attracting more businesses, but looking at other creative ways to raise revenue in the city? Or?
Oh, of course, attracting business, but not putting the burden wholly on new business, putting the burden on existing business. Finding, as you said, creative ways to increase the revenue.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about another issue that's on a lot of people's mind right now, shortage of housing in Concord. So that's a real issue for employers, for people moving into the area that are trying to find a place to live, and employers can't hire folks that can't afford to live here. So what do you suppose could happen? What do you think the city could do to help alleviate some of this housing shortage issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we talk a lot about zoning, changing or relaxing requirements, but I think, again, getting creative about things. So I did just a really basic search just to satisfy my own curiosity. Went on Airbnb. We have something like 380 Airbnbs in Concord.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, and that's just Airbnb. That's not talking about like Vrbo or other platforms. Not to say every single one of those properties is a multifamily or able to be changed into long-term housing, but looking at those and finding ways to incentivize those homeowners to say, maybe you want to take this property off the short-term market and make it a long-term. Granted, that's not a ton of additional housing, but it is one way that the city can get creative. I've looked at, there are other cities that have used initiatives to encourage a decrease of short-term rentals. And then, of course, obviously, working with developers to build new properties, all the things that we're already doing, just amplified. But then, again, being creative, but also not punishing people that want to have an Airbnb, that think that short-term tenancy is good, but saying, let's incentivize you to bring somebody here. We want the best and the brightest. We want them to stay here.
Okay, thank you. This next question is somewhat related. We have a significant homelessness issue here in Concord. It has been growing over the years. It has created some public safety and public health issues, human suffering notwithstanding. And we have some good organizations in the city that have done some great work, Concord Coalition in Housing and others. But the increase in the population of people that are unhoused is growing faster than we can provide other resources for them. So what do you think the city could do differently to address that issue?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a tough question that doesn't have any easy answers. I mentioned in another forum that the things that worked 10 years ago wouldn't work today. Things that worked somewhere else won't work here. But I think we need to look at the population of homeless that are here. We certainly want to help out our community and help out our neighbors. But I think we're seeing a surplus of people that are homeless that aren't from our community, that don't want help, that don't want to improve their situation. And I think we need to work to empower our public safety, our fire, our police, our other services, to be able to break up these communities that are building up in Concord, to be able to tell them to move along, that this isn't a place. And again, we want to be able to help the people that are from our community or that want to be in our community and need to get back on their feet. But the people that are just here that are making it unsafe for people to be in their own backyard, we want to have them either decide that they need to get help or move along.
Tough issue. No simple answer to that one. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, Taylor, and talk about tourism. So, in New Hampshire, we have a lot of visitors that come in and spend a lot of money. It's a major part of our economy. Concord is not exactly the White Mountains or the Lakes region, but it has its own charm to it relative to cultural attractions and history and things of that nature, and it's also very well geographically positioned. Do you think that we should be working harder to attract more visitor traffic into the area? And if so, what do you think the city's role would be there? I work for the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, this is important to us, and there are things that we do in that arena. But to do it really well requires some resources and a lot of attention.
Absolutely, and it's not something that you can just set and forget. You can't just say, here's money for tourism and let it go. It's something that the city actively needs to work on, and there needs to be a plan for that. Chamber of Commerce and the city need to sit down and work together and say, here's our plan, here's our marketing plan, here's our 5-year, 10-year plan for building tourism in this city. It doesn't just happen overnight. And to the point you just made, we're the last population center before where people go when they want to go up north. Why are they not stopping in Concord? Why are they not pulling off the highway and saying, I'm going to go get lunch in Concord, or I'm going to spend the night in Concord, go see the Franklin Pierce Manse, and then head up to the White Mountains tomorrow morning?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. A lot of people say that you're not really in New Hampshire until you hit the border of Concord. Those ideas are near and dear to my heart. And that sort of segues very well into the next question, which has to do with the expansion of Interstate 93 through Concord, which could be a great benefit to the city, or it could be a detriment if all we do is widen the highway to get cars passing through faster. That's not necessarily a positive thing. But I think that there are some opportunities there. If you look at the city from Interstate 93 and you don't know what Concord's like once you get into the city, you're probably not going to have a very good impression of it. We don't present ourselves well from the highway. What do you suppose we could be doing differently to get more people off the highway and into the city maybe in partnership with this expansion of I-93?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I've always joked, if money was no object, if I had a magical wand and could do whatever I want, I would love to see the highway move to the other side of the river and just have a beautiful riverfront that attracts so many businesses, can be absolutely beautiful, and encourage people to just really develop and build. And that's not really possible, unfortunately. The amount of money and resources that would require, like I said, would need a magical wand and infinite money. But we do need to work to encourage people to pull off the highway and want to come into Concord. How we do that, again, no easy answers, but working with Chamber of Commerce, working to develop a plan to make Concord, as you're driving by, more appealing, making people want to stop. The Hotel Concord has a beautiful sign right from the highway that, I grew up in Western New York. My parents come up once in a while to visit. Driving past in one of their visits, they saw that sign and said, we want to check that out. And now that's the only place they stay.
Well, that's a great example, and others have mentioned, creative use of lighting can be really a very relatively inexpensive way to get people's attention, at least during the nighttime when you're driving by. Hotel Concord did a great job. It'd be interesting to see if others
Follow suit.
Yeah, follow suit. I mean, I think there's opportunity. There has been some opposition to that, but I think folks have gotten used to that by now and actually appreciate what Hotel Concord has done. We've got a couple of minutes more. Do you have, what are your priorities? What's your reason for wanting to run for city council?
Yeah, my biggest priority, and what I've said time and again during this campaign, is the other candidates are all running and talking about, the different priorities they have, but nobody's come out and said, I'm here for the residents of Concord. I'm here to make sure that the taxpayer is being represented. Nobody has said that we want to make sure the city government is running smoothly. All the other candidates have talked about, again, their priorities, and they've talked about how there is a big shakeup this year. There's a lot of open seats. There's a lot of turnover. Mayor Jim, who's been great, is stepping down. There's going to be a new mayor. There's, again, several seats that are open, and there's going to be a lot of transition. And the city runs a very efficient government, but we do need people that are focused on keeping the government running smoothly. And yes, it's important to have those priorities, but it's also important to make sure that we continue to run as smooth as possible.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Jim. I appreciate you, Jim, I'm sorry. I appreciate you so much for coming by and spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.